the valley. Hope to be a fly fishing till the day that I die. Well, some folks like horses, cats or dogs. Me, I like fishing with a rod and fly. Yes, fishing is a favorite pastime of mine. If I couldn't do it, I think I would cry. Well, life is good when I'm wading a river. It gets even better when I cast a fly. If I catch a trout, it don't really matter. It's fun just to be here and give it a try. Spring has thawed out the long bitter winter. The water is clear and the skies are blue. I'm standing in the middle of the Delaware River. Might even catch and release one or two. Stoneflies and caddis in the riffles are plenty. Mayflies a courting on fragrant breeze. The cedar waxwings come down from the heavens, wait for their dinner up in the pine trees. A trout is rising in the far eddy. I make a false cast, then take my aim. If he takes the fly, I'd feel so much better, and if he doesn't, I'll feel no shame. The water is cold and my waders leak. It's raining down on my favorite stream. I'll bear it all just to fish with a feather, so when I sleep I will have a sweet dream. Life is good when I'm wading a river. It gets even better when I cast a fly. If I catch a trout, it don't really matter. It's fun just to be here and give it a try. Oh, riffles and waves, pools and eddies, trout are rising for the dry fly. The sun is shining down on the valley. Hope to be a fly fishing till the day that I die. Yes, I hope to be a fly fishing till the day that I die. Hi folks, how you doing today? Kurt Nelson here with Riffles and Waves. If you've been watching the show over the last couple of weeks, we talked about a couple of things here. We talked about tools that you need to tie flies, and we talked about materials last week. So if you missed any of those shows, contact me and on my email at avkurt@mac.com, and I can answer any questions you have about materials or fly tying tools. Okay, if you have any questions about those. Or if you'd like to see a repeat of a show, let me know and I can re-air that tape, you know, if you missed something. But anyway, the first 2 weeks there we showed tools and fly tying materials. Now today I'm going to start with a simple fly. It's a hare's ear nymph. It's probably one of the best flies for all around nymphing you can use. You can use it in Nanticoke Creek, you can use it in Owego Creek, you can use it on the Delaware River or the Beaverkill or wherever you might go fly fishing. Bass will eat it, trout will hit it readily. It's a great all-around fly, and I do use a little weight on my nymphs, on most of my nymphs. And what this is a non-toxic wire that adds weight to the hook, and we will wrap that around the hook. And this is usually optional, but I like to put a little weight on my nymphs. Okay, let's pop this fly right out of there, and let's put another hook in. Now for today's fly we're going to use a size 12 so that it shows up pretty well on TV. Okay, so let's get it in there. There we go, locked in, nice and tight. Now I'm going to use olive thread. Some folks use black thread for this, but I prefer olive. We're also going to use a little piece of tinsel. It's silver on one side and gold on the other, and I usually like gold for my hare's ear nymph. And we're also going to use some lacquered turkey quill. This has had lacquer applied to it so it's nice and stiff. Okay? And we're going to use a little piece of that for the wing case on our nymph. And we talked about the lead wire. We are also going to use a new tool here called the spinner. I don't think I talked about this one the other day, but this is the spinner. We will use this to dub the hare's ear body. And what the hare's ear implies to is the hare's ear mask. This has all kinds of fuzzy light fur from a hare's mask. It's a hare rabbit hide, and there's all different colors on it. It's a wild rabbit, and I use these longer guard hairs for the tail, and the softer fluffy stuff with the guard hairs is mixed in my little mixer here, and I mix it up so it's nice and well blended for color and the length of the fibers. And then we will spin this on our hook, and the hair should be sticking out really, and it should be a pretty ugly fly. But what those little hairs sticking out looks like are legs to the insect. So it's very important to, I always try to keep my flies as ugly as possible. If it looks good to me, it probably doesn't look good to the fish. So that's, that's one of my rules. But you may like pretty flies. So let's get started. Going to place a size 12 hook in my vise and make it level. We're going to start by wrapping the tying thread over itself to secure it. We're going to go all the way down to the bend of the hook. And this is a good time to also talk about the eye of the hook is where you tie your fly. That's right here. This is the shank from here down to where it starts to bend. The bend is where it bends. Then this hook has a barb on it, which is right in here, and a point. Okay? So a lot of times when you tie flies, your measurements are in proportion to the shape and size of the hook. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is take some of my non-toxic lead wire and wrap it around the hook, shank, about like so, and then I'm going to nip it here and push that down nice and tight. I'm going to nip it at the other end and make sure that piece is nice and tight. And I'm going to wrap thread back over that. Okay? And you can go pretty quick here and just make sure it's nice and secure. Okay, that helps hold the fly together and it keeps the lead from coming loose and going all over the place. So once we get that on there nice and tight, bring this back to the bend of the hook and let that hang down. Now we're going to take our hare's ear mask. We're going to cut out some of these fibers here for the tail. Okay, so I'm going to hold that and take my scissors and cut it. And then I'm going to pull the fuzzy hairs out of that and put them in my little mixing bowl because I can use all those again. Okay? Now we're going to use the pinch method. I'm going to pinch that on the hook, pull the line up through and come down nice and easy, and then pull up on the other side and then down nice and easy, and pull up is where you get the nice tension from. Then we're going to wrap that nice and tight. There's our tail. Okay. Now we're going to need a piece of tinsel, and this is some real fine copper wire I have, and this looks really nice on this. It's kind of a dark copper color. And we're going to pinch and hold that right on there and tie that right in there. Nice and secure. and put that in our spring materials clip here. This holds material out of your way. Now comes the fun part. We're going to spin some fur on here. So we're going to wrap that on there and bring this forward. We're going to take our spinner, okay, and hook this end on the line here. Actually, what's easier to do is to get some of our blended fur material, and this thread I'm using is already pre-waxed, so it will stick. Some of this fur will stick right to it as it is on one side. Now we're going to put our spinner on there, okay, and then we're going to spin this, and depending on how much you spin it is how tight it goes on, okay. Now I like to use, once I get it to where I like it, where I want it to be, I'll use my hackle pliers to hold the thread, okay. Put my hackle pliers on there to hold the thread in place. Whoops. And then I can wrap it. Now I can wrap it right around that hook, get it nice and tight, and this forms the body, and you see how those hairs are sticking out all over the place. That's good. That's what you want. And there we go. We have our body. Okay? So now we're going to tie that off. That's a big old body. That's a good one. That's what I like to see. Now we can nip off our little loop that we made for our spinner. Okay? Now we need to bring this copper wire. You can wrap it either way. Some people like to counter wrap it, and I like to wrap it the same way so that it goes right down inside of it and makes a nice rib so it looks like a real segmented body. And we're going to wrap that off. Nice. There we go. Now, back to our turkey quill. Cut a little piece out of there. No, I don't like that one. Let's take this one right here. Let's cut a piece right out of there and pull that off. Remember, that's lacquered, and we want to size it. We don't want it too thick. About 1/4 of an inch maybe is pretty good size. And that's our wing case. We're going to tie that on facing backwards. Okay? Now we need to do our thorax. See, this wing case will come up over the top of the thorax. Now, the thorax isn't that much space, but it's got a lot of fur on it. We want that to be really bulky and thick. So we're going to put a big wad of on the thread and just spin it around there. Okay? And then we're going to pull that wing case over the top of it. Okay? But first, I'm going to put a beard on this. A beard is pheasant or any other kind of fiber you want to use that you might have around. This happens to be pheasant quills, and I'm going to take those little quills and put them right on there and hold it on the bottom, and then, oops, come back here. I'm going to pinch that right on there, and then we're going to wrap that. Okay? Pretty easy. There's our little beard. Now we're going to nip that off. We're going to pull our wing case forward, and nice and easy around, and then tighten it. And there we go. Now we'll do a quick whip finish around there, and the way I like to do it is to just go a couple of times around and bring the thread around and over, and that's all I do. Okay, there we are. We're done with our fly as soon as we nip this off. So there we go. We got a nice little hare's ear nymph. With practice, you will be able to tie this fly very, very easily. It doesn't take a lot of time to tie this fly, and this is definitely a fly you want in your fly box. And if you have any questions about today's fly, or any other questions about fly fishing or fishing in general, please contact me at avkurt@mac.com. Now, next week I will be doing probably a dry fly, okay, and we'll get started on doing a simple dry fly. And each week we'll, for some of the weeks we're going to do fly tying, so we will do different flies. I also have some programs on geology and a program on safety and river usage and conservation. So we're going to try to cover a wide variety of topics. But again, in the wintertime, it's nice to sit down, it's snowing outside, and tying some flies and dreaming about spring.
There was a time, before the concrete started to flow, that the Snake River produced half of all the salmon in the Columbia River drainage. That's one of the major rivers in America. But the gauntlet of federal dams constructed to build the industry of the Northwest proved to be insurmountable, even for the king salmon, that mighty legendary fighter that holds such symbolic significance here. The confounding reality is we have the power to change the configuration and the operation of these dams. We have the power to save the salmon. The fight to save the salmon of the Northwest has national significance because, as in the case of the mighty bald eagle, it proves once again the tremendous importance of the Endangered Species Act. We must once again demonstrate the value of this important environmental law, and the salmon is the proper vehicle in which to do this. That creature that is the center of spiritual religion and a very significant part of this entire region must not be permitted to move into extinction. Your help is essential. Contact your congressman and urge them to see that the federal agencies, particularly the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bonneville Power Administration, become a part of the solution, and that they not resist change of a river system management that's going to make a museum piece out of the mighty salmon. There are two very important federal actions that must take place. First of all, the Army Corps of Engineers must be authorized to make the necessary structural changes, and OMB must be instructed to give BPA the necessary flexibility that it takes in their repayment schedule. Time is precious, ladies and gentlemen. Act now to save the salmon. Future generations will be in your debt.
The Salmon River no longer teems with Chinook salmon, and not one redfish returned to Redfish Lake last year, where once the bright vermilion of the sockeyes was a common sight. The great fish runs seem to have gone the way of the buffalo. As evening enfolds the rugged Sawtooth Mountains, an ancient custom is resurrected. For centuries, man has held candlelight vigils for long-forgotten reasons. And for centuries, the sockeye salmon have made the 900-mile journey home to the Stanley Basin. On this quiet summer evening, the two ancient traditions converge. A ritual watch has gathered on the banks of the Salmon River. Lookouts for what may be the last sockeye salmon in Idaho.
I just can't imagine no redfish in Redfish Lake, no salmon in Salmon, Idaho.
On April 2nd, 1991, the National Marine Fisheries Service proposed listing sockeye salmon as endangered. 2 months later, spring, summer, and fall Chinook salmon were added to the proposal as threatened species.
They're being listed because they're going away. The the wild salmon in Idaho are in real bad trouble. The coho are extinct. The fall Chinook are down to less than 100. The spring and summer Chinook are down to a few hundred. We're down to the California condor stage with sockeye.
Near midnight on this August evening, the candlelight watch melts away, disappointed. But early the next morning comes the reward. For the first time in 2 years, a sockeye salmon returns from the ocean to its spawning grounds at Redfish Lake.
It was great to actually have a sockeye actually come back to our hatchery. It's been since 1989 that I've seen one, and this morning we got one 21 inches long. We think it's a male.
2 more males and 1 female eventually join the first pioneer. In this carefully controlled environment at Sawtooth Hatchery lie the sole adult survivors of a species that once colored the waters of Redfish Lake crimson when they returned to spawn in the fall.
It's a tremendous lesson for people to learn that gosh, here's a fish that lives in this harsh, alpine, sterile environment and migrates 950 miles to the ocean and goes almost to the coast of Japan and makes this huge circle in the ocean and then comes back to this river and comes up through all this commerce and industry and back to this pristine high mountain country. We can't lose that.
Arduous though that return journey may be, it's the trip to the ocean that is killing these fish. In the early part of this century, a sockeye or Chinook smolt would wash down the roaring runoff of the Snake and Columbia River system from Idaho to the ocean in about 8 days. This hasty journey allowed the small fish to avoid predators and permitted the extraordinary biological changes to take place that adapt it from freshwater to saltwater. But as the West was settled, the tremendous force of the Columbia River system was looked upon as a source of power to be harnessed. Bonneville Dam was built in 1938. 7 more dams were added on the mainstream Columbia and Lower Snake by 1975. The Middle Snake added 3 more, the last being Hell's Canyon Dam, built in 1967. Now that same smolt can take from 20 to 90 days to reach the ocean, if it gets there at all.
Such a great number of them die during the out-migration process. And we talk about the dams, and people get real sensitive about the dams. It isn't necessarily the dams per se. It's the pools created by the dams and the system created by the dams of operating the river to maximize the hydroelectric system rather than to maximize the productivity of the fish. The answer is quite simply to make the river act like a river again.
70 to 90% of Idaho's salmon smolts never make it to the ocean. The number depends on water volume. These last 5 years of drought have had a devastating impact on salmon numbers. A good snowpack and a healthy spring runoff flushes the smolts through the reservoirs to Lower Granite Dam. Here, the Army Corps of Engineers has tried to transport the salmon in fish barges through the remaining dams. However, in low water years, the only way to ensure that the smolts flush through the slack water reservoirs is to reduce the volume in those reservoirs, thus creating the flow necessary to hasten the small fish on their way.
That's a matter of technology. It took technology to build the dams, and we've got people in the United States military that can figure out how to build a site on an airplane that will allow us to drop bombs into elevator shafts from 2 miles away, and we can sure as the devil figure out some way to get salmon back up a river and around a dam. It's a matter of having the commitment, making the commitment to do it, instead of to argue about whether it needs to be done.
What is the value of these fish? How do you put a price on a heritage? For years, salmon guide Bob Cole made his living on the Middle Fork of the Salmon River. His livelihood was tied up in these enormous fish. But for Bob Cole and other folks that remember the days of the big salmon runs, the intrinsic value of Idaho's salmon far outweighs the economic benefits.
I'm not sure that I'll ever see it again. I feel bad about it. It's fishing's been a big thing all my life, ever since I was just a little kid. And to guide people that's never seen a fish that big, it's great to see them catch one of them. If they'd hook a fish, you never knew what was going to happen. They might bail off in the river, they might throw their pole in the river. It's just, it was great.
Bob guided out of Middle Fork Lodge, located in the Frank Church River of No Return wilderness. Here, along the Middle Fork of the Salmon River, lies pristine habitat, perfect for salmon spawning. The few remaining wild salmon return here in late summer to build nests in the stream bottom to lay their eggs. These nests are called redds.
See that swell on the water surface right ahead of us there? There's probably red in there, probably several.
Each summer at this time, Fish and Game biologist Terry Holubetz and his crew conduct what is called a red count. One way or another, either by helicopter, airplane, drift boat, or just plain walking along the tributaries, the many miles of Idaho's pristine spawning habitat is surveyed for salmon nests.
Here we have an area that the female has dug out and laid the eggs in about this area right here. And then she went upstream and dug farther up and covered up those eggs.
Although there are isolated pockets of habitat that could use some improvement, for the most part, biologists have found Idaho's wilderness rivers to be prime spawning grounds for wild salmon.
Okay, 3 reds so far. And this area in the next 100 meters or so usually has a lot of reds in it.
In late spring, the salmon smolts emerge from their gravel nests and the count begins again. Biologists use snorkeling gear to count the juveniles. At this point, prior to their migration to the ocean, salmon numbers are good. But from the time a juvenile fish leaves here to the time it arrives here is the danger zone for these smolts.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to produce a whole lot of fish, either in hatcheries or in pristine habitat like the whole Middle Fork and the Selway and all the designated wilderness, when they 80 or 90 or 95 or 98% of them never make it to the ocean.
The big salmon runs in Idaho are a part of our wildlife heritage. Anglers that grew up fishing for the salmon can no longer do so. Native Americans are being cheated out of their treaty rights. And folks like Bob Cole have only photos and memories to replace the feel of a huge salmon on their line.
I feel the same way as everybody else does. I think we need to do anything we can do, anything we have to do to get the fish back. It would really help the economy, there's no doubt about it. You get a lot of local people that would go up there and spend the night if they had salmon up there. There was so many of the people that were just going through Stanley Basin, be there for a day or two. They'd drive down the road and see somebody packing a 25-pound salmon up the shoulder of the road, and they'd burn the rubber and want to know who could take them fishing. And it was great.
Idaho's lost the buffalo, virtually eliminated the wolf. Caribou and grizzly bear teeter on the edge of extinction. The salmon has shown its determination to survive by its incredible 900-mile journey. Now it's up to man to match that fortitude.
And I think the nation is losing something. These fish go away, they're not going to come back.
If I catch a trout, it don't really matter. It's fun just to be here and give it a try. Oh, ripples and waves, pools and eddies, trout are rising for the dry fly. The sun is shining down on the valley. Hope to be a fly fishing till the day that I die. Yes, I hope to be a fly fishing till the day that I die.